Okay, so next, we have a very special panel for you to kick off the brand new Future Skills at Cannexus programming. This new Future Skills partnership is something that Sarek is really excited to bring to the Cannexus conference, and we'd like to ask Pedro Barada to come up from the Future Skills Center and say a few words of welcome and introduce the panel.
Donc, on a un nouveau partenaire cette année avec le Centre des compétences futures. Donc, on est très, très fiers au CERIC de travailler avec eux. Donc, on invite les gens à venir vous dire un petit mot. Pedro.
Thank you.
Hello, bonjour à tous. I'm going to actually ask the first panelist to just come up and sit with me on stage so that I don't feel like I'm all alone here in this big room. Hi, everybody. Woo. Man, day 3, eh? I want to thank Sarek for bringing us back together. This is incredible, incredible energy, incredible content and substance. But I've been mostly struck and inspired by being together with people, by being together, quality time, and not just in Zoom rooms, but also in hallways and in hallway conversations and building the DNA that is really gonna make us stronger. I was also reminded just how diverse we are as a group. We all come from different places, different regions. We practice in different ways, but our work has never been more important. And the opportunity to spend 3 days reminding ourselves of that is quite special. So how about we give a big round of applause to Sarek for pulling us together and helping us do this. Way to go, Riz and team. So context is really important for our work, as we know, and it starts with reconciliation. And so I want to acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered here in Ottawa today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have been in this territory since time immemorial, and we are very grateful to come together in this territory and commit ourselves to stronger relations with Indigenous people, learning about our shared history, taking responsibility for our part in that history, and doing our part as Indigenous people, as allies, to drive toward truth and reconciliation. I am very lucky to work at the Future Skills Center and to sponsor this morning's session. We're funded as part of the Government of Canada's Future Skills program, and we are great partners, and we have great partners at the Government of Canada. And of course, we focus on the skills that people in Canada are going to need to navigate a very fast-changing labor market into the future. We partner with Toronto Metropolitan University, which includes, of course, the Diversity Institute and Magnet. We partner with Conference Board of Canada, that has helped us pull together this morning's session, and, of course, with Blueprint ADE, that's really driving a lot of the content of what we're going to hear about today. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Karen Myers. We work with hundreds of partners and organizations across Canada. Many of you here today, I loved spending time in the adjacent room and reconnecting with so many partners from across Canada and just figuring out how tall they are and like sort of looking them in the eye and seeing people smile, right? That kind of communion was quite special. And a central part of our mandate, of course, is that nobody in Canada is left behind, that we have all hands on deck, that we acknowledge systemic barriers, and that we work actively and proactively to make sure that everybody can participate in building our shared prosperity. So to date, and many of you will be part of our KPIs, we have partnered with more than 200 projects and partnerships across every province and territory, most economic sectors. We've released dozens of pieces of research, including pretty cutting-edge research and thought pieces led by Blueprint on this area of responsive career pathways. And we've engaged thousands of skills development stakeholders across our network from coast to coast to coast. And this topic that we're very happy to host this morning around responsive career pathways has been front and center for our mandate since the very beginning. It's one of the pillars of our strategic plan. It's what we heard was a priority that we needed in Canada. And today is a little bit of a coming out party for us in terms of all of the work that we have been doing, because we believe that everyone in Canada should have the skills that they need to have decent work, to build a good life, and to contribute to our shared prosperity. But of course, we recognize that there's a lot of change underway. We all know that. We all live that. And everyone, whether you are coming out of school, whether you're new to Canada, whether you're changing employment paths by necessity or by choice, whether you're an employer trying to figure out changing business models or the shift to net zero, this new normal means that everybody is going to have to adapt to be resilient, and we all share that in common. And in the midst of that magnitude, all these changes, the diversity of circumstances, the fact that it's not one size fits all in terms of employment paths, it's essential that career navigation, career development is at the center of ensuring everyone is at their best. And having access to career advice, to career guidance, to skills development, it's key to help everyone make well-informed choices. So we want to make sure that individuals can navigate that. We also want to make sure that employers really embrace skills development, that career navigation as part of their business model, their business plan, and their success strategy. So this morning we're going to dig into all of that and go from framing to the actual details. And we're very lucky that we're going to have 3 sessions this morning looking at trends in career development and career advice and guidance in responsive career pathways. We're going to look at the role of employers who are already thinking deeply about this and how to embed this as part of a core strategy for success, how provincial governments are driving change and thinking about leveraging their existing infrastructure to adapt and think forward. And also how, very importantly, at the center of all of this, how we need to acknowledge that career practitioners themselves have to be at the center of it, but we need to create capacity, we need to create infrastructure, and we need to value this work and really invest in it, invest in making it the best that we can. So, I'm just going to, before I turn it over to you, Karen, I want to thank you and CCDF and of course Mixed Mode for really being our lead partners on this file. So thank you so much for your energy and for curating this work today and driving it. I also want to thank the Conference Board of Canada, our partners, for helping to pull and organize the session. Of course, CERIC for letting us have a little bit of your program and a little bit of your time. So thank you, Riz and team. My team at FSC for continuing to drive the bus on this and making sure that we have a good session today. And of course, our partners at the Federal Government Future Skills Program, ESDC, for being as excited as we are about what we can do together on responsive career pathways. And with that, Karen Myers, CEO at Blueprint ADE, thank you. Over to you. Round of applause for Karen.
Thank you, Pedro. So, Pedro, I share your enthusiasm. We've got a great session to look forward to this morning, and we've got a stellar panel to kick it off. So I couldn't be more delighted to be part of it. This morning, we're going to start by talking about some of the labor market trends that we have been experiencing, how they are shaping the future of work, and what that all means for career development services. So let's talk about the labor market. Kind of puzzling, eh? In 3 years, we have had such dramatic swings. Before the pandemic, we were all focused on technology and the disruption that it would create, and all of our energies were focused on thinking about how can we accomplish the massive reskilling that would be needed. And just as we were starting to get our heads around that, the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we were shifting our thinking from thinking about disruption to thinking about actual economic shutdown and how we can help workers when the bottom was falling out of the labor markets. And then we got good at doing that. We were agile, we were really really pivoted to do that work. And then we started thinking about recovery. And many of us were getting inspired around the Build Back Better narrative, and just as we were starting to get our heads around what that might mean, we were told, hey, there's no time for that. We've got to drop everything and help employers figure out how to get workers. It was like a collective, frantic struggle to help employers amidst massive labor market shortages now. So, it's kind of puzzling. I don't know if it's just me or is anyone else dizzy trying to follow it all. So today, our panelists are going to talk a little bit about how they have been experiencing these trends in their workplaces, how they've been helping their employers figure these things out, and how they're helping employees adapt to these changes and be ready for these changes. So the question of labor markets, and what it all means, these are big questions, but we are very lucky because we have among the best to help us figure it out. So today we have Lisa Melo from RBC, we've got Jennifer Pierce from Walmart, and we've got Malika Asthana from D2L. And so I'm sure you're here very keen to hear what they all have to say. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, tell us about your current role, and tell us about some of these labor market trends and how they're hitting your firm, your sector, what you're experiencing now, how that's different to what you were seeing before, and what you think lies ahead. So Lisa, I'll start with you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Lisa Melo. I lead learning and performance at RBC. And I would, echo what you've said over the past 3 years. It's just been dizzy. A couple of the trends that we're seeing at RBC, of course, is the acceleration to digitization. It had always been our strategy to get digitized, but it just made us have to do it all that much sooner. And with that, come roles that we hadn't really had to hire a lot of in the past. So that also led to reskilling, right? Where, we weren't even able to find some of these new skills in the market. So we've had to figure out how we reskill internally in addition to hiring in the market. So those would be two.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Jennifer.
I'm going to make sure, it is on. Okay, I can hear it. Excellent. I'm going to try to do some justice to the question, but I'm sure I'll leave a lot out. My name is Jennifer Pierce. I go by my initials, JP. Working at Walmart Canada, I think what COVID did for us is, one, it showed that not all heroes wear capes. I think for me personally, understanding when the bottom goes out of an economy, the people that continue to make the economy work are the people that sometimes we overlook the most. And so what COVID also did for us is it acted like a time machine into what we would call omni-retailing. And so as we have sort of pondered, should we, shouldn't we, how fast should we go, how much money will it take, et cetera, COVID accelerated that because we needed to feed Canadians. And it gave us great pride to do so. But with that came sort of a new understanding of what the retail store looks like. So at the back of some of our stores today, it looks like a fulfillment center, like a DC. In the front part of our store, it looks like a regular general merchandise or shopping center. And so what that means is, of course, the people who are doing the work have to completely change the way in which they do the work. So that was sort of our front line and our DC line. And then, of course, in the office, we had to figure how to live in this new world. So we're embracing the new economy. We call it Spark Our Tomorrow, really sort of no one left behind, where we are able to truly save Canadians money so we all live better, but create a live better strategy for our people. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Malika Asthana. I'm the Manager of Strategy and Public Affairs at D2L, which is an education technology company headquartered out of Kitchener. So you can imagine working in education technology, just how much the pandemic changed things. But the interesting thing, having worked in policy research in this space for a number of years, is that the forces of change that were already reshaping the future of work and learning, demographic shifts, the rapid change of the rapid shift to digitalization, the need for systems to adapt more quickly to employer needs, those are all still happening. As my colleague likes to say, the only difference is it's no longer the future of work, it's the now, and the only constant is really change. The reality is the education system that we've traditionally had has been designed for a very outdated notion of what a job is, as an amalgamation of tasks, and it's very much suited to a very old way of thinking about, essentially essentially what you're there to do at work. What we're seeing now, though, I think, is this idea that, as Pedro was saying, we need to be empowering people to be in their own positions, to take charge of their own careers, but also recognize that as the industry shift and as the tides shift among us, we need to also be able to enable people to adapt very quickly. And I'm looking forward to discussing more of that in the panel today when it comes to upskilling.
Okay, so thank you for sharing a little bit about what you are responding to. Now I'm going to shift us to think a little bit about how you are responding. So give us a sense of the types of strategies you are using, what you're doing related to career development, learning and development, and tell us what some of the enablers are too, and maybe a little bit about some of the barriers you face in doing this work. So Jennifer, let's start with you this time.
All right. There's so much, so keep me timed here. Some of the things I'll start with are just sort of framing. I use a quote given today's marketplace that we're not going to be able to recruit our way out of this. We're going to have to develop our way into it. And so with that, we're really being very declarative about our talent strategy, which is internal and forward first, Walmart family second, external recruiting third. And where in the past we might have leaned into external recruiting first because we didn't have those skills. And so it was really about a skills pacing, and somebody could hit their ground running, so to speak. But we're having to invert that, just given the competitive nature. I believe all companies post-COVID are at the same place on the running race. We're all chasing the same people at the same time, which means we've got to look internally to the amazing talent that we have. So that's sort of the beginning framing. We started earlier this year with Skyhive, with Blueprint, with Accenture, looking at 18 roles in our front-facing businesses, whether that's in our retail business or our DC business. And we asked ourselves the question, what's going to happen to their skills? Will these roles actually go away? And I think we went into the sort of research with the hypothesis that the roles might be going away. Much to our surprise, what we realized is 30 to 40% of their skills are going to be changing, not necessarily the role going away itself. And so that really has now launched the next phase of our understanding. So at our associate level, our frontline level, we're really introducing a moment that matters called Grow Me. And we're introducing these constructs 4 times a year called Grow Me Weeks, where they are dedicated places in the year to talk about development, to talk about them, such that what do you want to do? Here's what I see as your strengths. What are you interested in doing? And how might we further you in terms of building a better career, hopefully at Walmart Canada? So that's one of the initiatives. Many of our associates have dual job codes, so they do more than one job, so that is much towards the pacing of longer term. We are about to add in tuition assistance, where we will pay for education for what we're calling promoted pathways, or what perhaps others might call in-demand jobs. So we're looking at our long-term plan. So for example, healthcare. We have great ambition to increase our healthcare business so that we can help Canadians save money and live better. So really focusing in on live better. Well, what does that mean? So today, if you're an optician and you're an optical, you're only trained for either contacts or frames. You're not trained for both. Well, why wouldn't we want you to be trained for both? So we're looking at a variety of different skills that support the business long-range plan, and we will help our associates foot the bill of that education. It's very early days, so I can't speak much more than that, but I couldn't be more excited about it. In addition to that, for our salaried associates, we've just embraced a talent marketplace. We're working with the provider Gloat, but we're calling it internally Compass, and it really is a path for all. And that is going to be resting on AI to help sort of unknown career paths, mentoring, sort of I'll call it skill or season-based mentoring versus I want to mentor for my lifetime. And then, of course, gigs. And gigs really is the 70% of the 70-20-10 learning. So those are some of the things that we're doing to advance our population and hopefully live better careers.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. This is all so fascinating. And I have one follow-up question for you. How would you how would you characterize the shifts in what you are focused on? Are these is this a new way of doing business for Walmart? Is this a continuation of what you have been doing, but a deepening of it? How would you describe the change?
It's a bit of both. So I would say we've always been in the business of training our people. I don't know that we've been as bold at using technology to be helping us do it. And we're certainly taking giant leaps on acceleration. It's not okay to take a decade to move an associate from a frontline associate to a store manager, taking a person from minimum wage to a six-figure salary. We want to be able to do that much faster than 10 years.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lisa.
A lot of similar to what JP just mentioned. A couple things. Talent marketplace is also very, very important to us. And as JP said, moving away from recruiting externally for specific skills to more developing internally, for these roles. And starting to think about moving away from traditional hierarchy, this is your job, this is your role, and this is who you report to more networks of teams and skill base. So your role may not change completely, but it will evolve as our client needs evolve as well. So that involves reskilling, making sure that when we take a cohort of employees to reskill, that we have a job for them to go into afterwards. That's very, very important. More self-directed learning. We have just implemented about a year ago a technology finally at RBC that allows us to be able to use AI and to be able to push out opportunities for career or development based on your role, your current role, based on the skills that you've identified or skills that have been inferred. So a lot more career pathing. Self-directed, of course, there's more structured training that will always happen. So it is a bit more putting back into the employee's hands the ownership of their career, as well as the bank. So a couple of things. We also do rotational programs. We have an Indigenous people rotation program. We have traditional leadership development programs. And we have a program called Career Launch, where we bring in 100 people every year who have some form of post-secondary. Doesn't have to be university, but we do offer a one-year rotation where they work for RBC, they gain skills in different functions and businesses. They also do a charity rotation. So their resume, now has some professional kind of corporate experience to allow them to go out and be able to find employment. As much as we would love to hire all of them, we're in our 10th year now, and we do hire some back. We convert some for sure, but it really is about giving these young people confidence, right, and some skill that they can go out into the workforce. And not be in that vicious cycle of not having experience, so not having an opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And I'll ask you the same follow-up question. How much of what you're doing is a change in the way you do business, or would you characterize it more as a deepening of what you've already been doing?
I would say it's a deepening because we've experienced for years, the jobs that go away, and then jobs you didn't even imagine were possible, and now you think about UX, right, or machine learning specialists. These jobs didn't even exist, a few years ago. Now, they're highly in demand. So we've known that we always have to evolve. I think what the big change for us is more the focus on internal versus going external for skills.
Okay, so Malika, I'm going to ask you a slightly different, a related but different question. So we've been hearing about some pretty exciting practices And I'm really picking up on the notion of career pathing within the organization and being able to do it in a really agile, kind of just-in-time way. Jennifer, I really like what you said. We can't take a decade to do this, so we have to be able to move quickly, and we have to be able to adapt to labor market changes. I'm also aware that you both work for among the largest employers in Canada, and you have resources to do this work in a pretty powerful way. So Malika, I'm going to ask you, help us break it down a bit and what that might mean for small and medium-sized employers, what the career practitioners working for publicly funded services can take from this. We know you've done some really great research and some thought pieces in this area, so what should we be paying attention to?
Thank you, Karen. So I've had the opportunity to be here at Cannexus over the last couple of days, and I think there's so much great learning that's happened and across all panel discussions. So I just want to echo some of the things that I've heard in other discussions. For career development practitioners, as you can tell from this panel, the language that's used sometimes to describe the challenges is very employer-oriented, and it might be different from what's happening in career development theory or practice. So what we're talking about here is recruitment and retention challenges, and talking about wanting to enable people not just for the jobs they're in, but for the jobs that they can have within an organization or indeed within an industry. That also resonates within the research that I just did earlier this year. So at D2L, as I mentioned earlier, I lead the development of our strategic thought leadership on the future of work and learning. We've published an annual series since 2016, and this past year our paper was focused on comparing the experiences of small and medium-sized employers in Canada and the US when it comes to upskilling challenges. What we found was frankly alarming, and it really reflects the trends that we've seen for a very long time in Canada when it comes to training. One of the highlights from the pieces was that only 21% of Canadian small and medium-sized employers that we surveyed felt very confident that they have the skills and talent they need to grow in the next 3 years. While a large majority of them are supporting some form of employer-supported skills development, very few of them, I think it was 34%, are supporting external training for skills development. And in a small and medium-sized employer, where one person might be doing many different jobs, there may not be the same level of in-house onboarding programs or necessarily even opportunities for talent marketplaces, depending on the sizes of the organization. And so it's really about even showing people what's possible for skills development and giving them access to opportunities that may be beyond their organization, but still that they can start building towards in their current organization. So one of the things that we're thinking about at D2L is how to create the infrastructure from a technological perspective to empower people to take charge of their own careers. So one of our new products is called D2L Wave, and essentially it's an upskilling platform, marketplace for people to access verified credentials from post-secondary education institutions, as well from licensed providers, and match them up to the skills that are needed, not only within an employer, but also within an industry. So things like communication, it depends, of course, on the industry, communication skills, problem solving, leadership, some of the things that we've been talking about in other sessions on social and emotional skills, but there are also more technical areas there. And the idea with that is that you don't need to necessarily go and shoot for the moon right off the bat. You can work with whatever budget you have, and the most important message for the employers that we're trying to share is that you can start with infrastructure in place to give people some kind of subsidy to further their education and their training, and also provide them with some time off to do so. And that's really what we're trying to do with D2L Wave, is create an opportunity for employers of all sizes to be able to provide ongoing upskilling opportunities to their employees, even if it doesn't necessarily happen in-house.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Jennifer or Lisa, is there anything you would add to that? Okay. I'm going to shift us to thinking a little bit about the big picture. So when Pedro kicked off our session this morning, Pedro talked about the vision that we have, no person left behind, that every person in Canada has the career advice and guidance that they need, they have the skills that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. So what have we been learning over the past couple of years that can help us get there? How can we ensure that everyone in Canada has access to high-quality career advice and guidance, has access to the skills development they need? How can we take some of these practices that you have been developing in your own organizations? I mean, in some ways, you've got like career development centers internally in your organization, which I mean is just astounding, and have been showing us like a little bit of how you connect the dots with all of the pieces to create a career and skills ecosystem that is like really demand informed, but with your employees at the center of it. So how can we take some of this thinking and ensure that everyone across Canada has access to it? So big question. Who wants to go first?
I can try. I won't get it all the way to right, so my colleagues and you in the room, of course, can add to this conversation. I think some of it starts with a mindset shift. If I think, and I won't quote all the data sources, so I apologize to the researchers that have done this research, it is not my own. A life skill lasting 2 to 4 years, 40% of skills inside a job changing by 2030. It is no one's fault that they won't be able to keep pace with the change in the economy, simply on those 2 stats alone. And so what that means for me personally as an employer is there needs to be a mindset shift that we actually are part of the education ecosystem. If we think about Linda Grattan and Scott's 100-year life, this idea that we're going to be having 60-year careers, well, what that means to me is we're in formal education from, age 3 or 4 until, I don't know, pick your early 20s. You now have another 60 years, 50 years if you want to retire early, I suppose, where you're working inside the sort of the not-for-profit, the for-profit complex. We actually will have more responsibility for education than the education system does. And today, the way most organizations, and that I've been a part of, I can't speak for everybody, training is sort of this, of course we have to do it, but does it really have to cost that much? And one of the things that I really like about the Quebec government, and I've never worked in the Quebec government, is the construct of the 1% payroll tax going to training. I think more of that has to become part of our everyday lexicon so that we're thinking about the return on investment of a hire versus the cost to hire. So I'd like to see organizations not have the ability to exit out of training monies, but rather embrace the mindset of, isn't this wonderful that we can create a better company, but more importantly, better careers for our individuals, better family experiences, better communities, and ultimately a better country. And with that, I would like my Miss Universe. Thank you.
That's so well put, so well put. I mean, we've really got to break out of this learn, earn, and rest paradigm. Like that linear way of thinking just doesn't work anymore. And so helpful to be thinking about how do we actually create the muscle to do this, and what do our programs and policies need to look like. All right. Lisa.
Yeah, I'll go. I agree with all of that, JP. I really think that it starts in school, right? Malika, you talked about critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence, authenticity, these type of skills. It would be wonderful if people came into the workforce, already having those skills. And of course, those skills are going to change and evolve over time, but some commitment to, in the schools, post-secondary, secondary, primary, all the way up. At RBC, we're highly regulated, of course. We have to do a certain amount of training hours every year, but we don't want compliance, right? We want our employees to actively seek it out, whether it's through career pathing, through mentoring, through sponsorship. So these are, very, very important. And this, JP, to what you were saying about mindset of continuous development. You may be happy in what you do in your job, but trust me, that is going to change. Not that you're not going to be happy, but the job is going to change or evolve. So, we need to be committed to continually developing ourselves. So there is no rest. Right? It's learn, grow, develop, learn more, grow more, develop more, and so on. So that would be what I think.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Malika.
My mind is buzzing with ideas, so I'm trying to pick a couple recommendations here. I'm going to jump off what JP just said about, I think it was healthy workers, healthy families, and healthy communities. I think if there's one thing that I've seen over the course of the pandemic is this widespread recognition that intersectionality matters, and you can't divorce someone's skills needs from their ability to grow. I'm mixing up my words now, but to be able to earn higher wages, to be able to pay for childcare and elder care supports, to be able to live in affordable housing, to be food secure, to be able to have transit options to get to work. There was another panel a couple days ago that was saying, why would you be thinking about which course you can take next when you don't even know where you're going to be sleeping the next night? And I think we have to continue to center the human in these experiences, whether it's in the employer, in the higher education institution, or other training provider, or in the government. And sometimes that gets lost in the conversation when we're thinking a little bit too high up. The other thing I would say is when it comes to government, I think there is a huge opportunity for the federal government in particular to really set the standard when it comes to thinking about a national workforce innovation strategy. There are so many lessons to learn from great employers in Canada, including Walmart Canada and RBC. And there's great work already happening with Essential Skills Framework. And I think sometimes what happens, though, is we get a little bit too siloed in our thinking, and one department is doing something and it doesn't necessarily go into the other department. The more that we can do cross-collaboration within government and including these discussions, employer and career development practitioners, the better off we'll all be, because this is not a fight anyone can win on their own.
Can I add just a...
Yeah.
I hope I'm on. Am I on? Yes? I'm a career practitioner at heart. I started my career there, and I probably will never leave the work that you all do. I believe it's a worthy calling, so please keep doing what you're doing. One of the things I think has to change is the mindset of up is not the only way. So if we're going to be embracing a skills-based culture, and it's not about a ladder career, and I know you talk about this all the time, a ladder to a lattice to a portfolio to a network career, and I think, we're doing a great job of talking about it, but I don't actually think it's seeping in to the people's souls. And I can speak sort of, from my own ecosystem. If you've got parents who have had children go to a post-secondary course of any type, and then they say, what do you mean you didn't get $10,000 more in a promotion? And aren't you making more money? You're working harder. There's something sort of in the system itself that is going to have to shapeshift. as we're embracing a skills-based organization rather than titling. And I do not have the answer to that by any means, but I know that it's a huge conversation that I look forward to in the next 50 years.
And just to add to that, I would agree. We have to get out of this traditional thinking how we pay people. Compensation is a barrier to some of these more innovative, type of ways of getting work done. So it really, is going to require just this commitment and mental shift, to your point, that it's not just up. There's multiple careers. In my company, for sure, it's huge. I was telling JP earlier that I've done 14 jobs in, my 35 years with RBC. And not all, companies can do that, obviously, but the mindset, right, that you can get fulfillment and you can be paid, not just going up, right, but going across and more of this kind of network teams.
Couldn't agree more with my co-panelists. The other thing I would say is when we talk about early career development, we tend to talk about families and caregivers who are influencing the pathways a lot of times. When we get into the workplace, sometimes it's also about informing managers or direct supervisors who are trying to coach their employees and don't necessarily always have the skills to do so. So in the research that we just published earlier this year, which by the way is called Enabling Upskilling at Scale, if you'd like to check it out, we found that only 41% of Canadian employees at small and medium-sized enterprises say that their direct supervisor or manager was even involved in helping them drive forward their professional development goals, compared with 64% in the US, by the way. And I think that's a real challenge, and it's certainly not to put blame to management. Being a middle manager, if you will, is a very challenging position because you're being pulled in different directions. But using that language of strengths-based hiring and skills potential and thinking about transferability of competencies, I think that's hugely important, and it's not necessarily something that we're doing a very good job of talking about necessarily in less established organizations.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting in these last couple of points. I mean, they're really resonating for me as an employer and as a leader of an organization of 60 people that is working in the innovation and evidence space. I mean, the work we are doing is constantly changing. So job descriptions and really rigid ladders, that just doesn't work for us, right? And the real growth is often lateral, and it's about doing new things in new ways and so on. So breaking out of that thinking is like really key, I know, to our own success. So I've got lots of questions, and I would love to follow up on some of them, but I'm also mindful of time, and I know we wanted to create some space for some questions from the audience. So I believe we've got a couple of minutes for that. Is there anything that anyone would like to ask our panelists? And is there someone with a mic that will go around?
We use this mic? Yeah.
All right. Urvashi.
Yes. Is this working?
I think so.
This has been a very interesting panel, a lot of learnings, and I want to bring it back to two questions. One is that, Karen, you started out with. So we are hearing a lot of success stories, and we are hearing a lot of enthusiasm. We are in this innovation space. So I would urge all three of you to a little bit highlight, so what hasn't worked? So mindset shift is not an easy thing. It's a huge challenge. So what are some of the challenges you have encountered and how you have shifted the pace to adapt to it? So that's one part of the question. The second is about, as Pedro mentioned, about the inclusion. So just putting some stats out there. So 98% of businesses in Canada are small and medium. So I think the challenge is also how aware are those who need it the most that they need to have some sort of career development intervention. Who is out there to help them? So are we in this process really getting those who are already engaged, or have you seen some progress with these initiatives to actually bring those in who are at the margins? So because we see this in the survey a lot of people don't recognize that they need any training or they need any intervention, and they may be the ones who need it the most. So how do we move from this reactive space to a responsive space, and what do you think needs to happen to start making progress? So thank you.
Okay, Urvashi, so those are big questions. I'm going to take some moderator liberty and break that down sort of into two parts. So first part, what have you been working on that's been hard? And second part, are you seeing a shift in who you are engaging in learning and development in your organization? Are there people that you might not have invested in before that you are now investing in, or is it the case that, you know, those who have are getting more?
I'm not sure which question I'm answering, but I'll give you my shot. If I think about the Gallup data that says 70% of an associate's experience is directly related to their relationship with their leader, we get it wrong a lot. So it's not that everybody doesn't have an opportunity for conversations on growth and development. The question is, we are so productivity focused. We've got to get the, you know, whether it's the tuna or the bananas, by the way, are the highest selling product at Walmart Canada, just in case you get a trivia. Keurig took over for Black Friday for about 20 minutes. You've got to get the bananas from the truck to the front so the customer can buy it. And of course, in that task is the human. And so I think what we get wrong a lot is we are so productivity focused that we don't always take advantage of what I'll call the H to H, the human to human connection. That's why we are doubling down this year on these Grow Me sort of quarterly weeks, where they are dedicated nudges to remind the leader that this is the moment, if you haven't done it already, and you should have, but we understand you might not have, that every single individual that you work with deserves a conversation where the two of you meet as equals and partners to talk about what they enjoy about their role, what strengths maybe that we're not using, that we don't see because we're only looking at them to move a product from A to B and we don't realize they're taking a marketing course, whatever that may be. So we get that wrong a lot, and that's what the data says. The other thing that we get right and wrong is we have more training and more assets and more opportunity than you can even believe. The problem is access. So because we have so much, it's hard to know how to navigate it. And so our work is to simplify as much as possible and to over-communicate where it is you can find this. So we've got that sort of tech piece figured out to do. And then, of course, we've got the human-to-human connection with the leader. And then my final statement would be, it's all of our responsibilities to work with one another to thrive. And career is a part of that. I think when you're at a restaurant, you talk about a couple of things. Perhaps your partner that is bothering you, your kids that are bothering you, and your job that is bothering you. So I think we've got some work to do.
Okay. Lisa or Malika, you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll just build on what JP, a couple things with people managers. I would say that's been hard as well when you have people managers in an organization like ours, thousands of them at all levels, right? Very junior to very senior. And that people managers view it as their responsibility, as their commitment to develop their people. That means giving them time, right? To go seek out learning and to seek out training. And that it's your job as a leader to develop people so that they do move on or across or over, to bigger and better things versus, hoarding, this talent that is really good at what they do. So we're working more and more with the people managers so that they can understand how important it is to develop their people, and that if they don't, then, forget about taking people away from the front line. We're not going to grow if they don't allow that opportunity. I would say what we're trying to get right is career pathing, right? And that is for every single employee in our company. It's not only about structured learning, going to a training session. It's about curated paths, the type of work, maybe not specifically a role, but the type of work, that you like to do or that you're passionate about, and having something curated that you can do on your own time. And that can be reinforced, with the support of your people manager. So trying to make it like democratize learning, for everybody. Is something that we're working very hard to do.
Yeah, I love that. Democratize learning. Malika.
Wonderful insights from everyone. I think in terms of what's been challenging is that we spend way too much time talking about definitions and the right language and what everything means, and it doesn't translate across sector or industry. I think I'm seeing that in my current research on micro-credentials, which is very challenging. Employers, for the most part, don't understand what micro-credentials are. Higher education institutions are still in the process of marketing things. We spend way too much time thinking about those types of things instead of trying to solve the problems at hand. So I suppose my coming around processing in real time is that sometimes we forget what we're trying to solve for. So that's one thing. I want to also pick up on the inclusion part of it. So I think sometimes in the research and policy literature, we get so divorced from the actual subject, which is the human, that we start to use language like low skill, which I have been actively trying to banish from my vocabulary, because it's not possible that anyone has a low skill. They're having a low access to opportunity. But I think, from an employer perspective, my colleagues on the panel have done a great job at explaining how it's not just giving opportunities to people who are already in management positions and up. It's giving people access to opportunities regardless of where they are in the organization, and also where they are in their careers, including early career opportunities. And I think that's hugely important, regardless of the size of your organization or the industry you're in. Alice Dawn is a great example of a construction leader in Ontario that I think does a fantastic job of walking the talk when it comes to making sure skills opportunities are available to all levels of the organization, whether you're really frontline or in the office. The other thing I would say is just picking up on my colleagues when it comes to cost and time. Those are the two biggest barriers in our research that we found that are preventing people from taking on opportunities. And I want to just rail a little bit against the language that people don't think that they need it. Our researchers found that 72% of Canadian employees want to take on training opportunities. Only 12% of them are. Why is that? They don't have time due to work, family, or other outside commitments, and Canadians are 3 times more likely to pay for the full cost of the training themselves. So that's a major problem if you're already facing financial pressures for whatever reason. And that's a problem I think that our governments and certainly nonprofit organizations and employers themselves can also spend more time thinking about and making changes on.
Yes, thank you so much, Malika, for bringing us to putting our feet on the ground and thinking about this from the perspective of individuals that are balancing family responsibilities, are already squeezed with their time at work, and thinking about how do we actually create space for learning to happen. So that's really super important. I'm looking at our organizers. Do we have time for one more question? Okay, I am getting the signal that it is time to wrap up. So thank you so much, Malika, Lisa, Jennifer. This has been fantastic. We really appreciate hearing your perspectives as employers and as leaders in this field. So please join me in thanking our panelists.